broadcast. I'd like to also bring in now on 6 p.m. Prime, Bethany Mendel, a senior journalist who's joining us from Washington, D.C. Bethany, thank you very much for taking the time out and joining us here on India Today. Good morning, first of all, to you. Do you see a wave of sympathy vote going for Trump in the back of what's really happened in the shooting in Pennsylvania?
I think that we're not going to see a big change in how much people like Donald Trump, but it was a very contrasting moment between when we saw President Trump jump up with his fist up and he had cat-like reflexes versus the next day when President Biden finally spoke to the nation. He shuffled off in a really honestly disturbing manner. Already 80% of Americans were worried about his age, and seeing the contrast in their physical abilities was very striking.
You raise an important point there. So do you think that, Bethany, if there's an impact really of this assassination attempt in the election, it's more so because of what Trump did after the attempt, after the shooting, of raising his fist in the air and yelling, "Fight, fight," to the crowd there, not cowing down in any manner? Do you think that has the bigger impact than the shooting itself?
I do. I think that his ability to dive down and to stand back up, it was very impressive for anyone, let alone a man of his age. But what I'm hearing about his speech, he's told my friend Selena Zito, she wrote about it in the Washington Examiner, that he threw out the convention speech that he had written before the assassination attempt. He's going to write a much more unifying speech. If he pulls that off, if he changes the tone and the tenor of his campaign because of this assassination attempt, I think that will be a game changer for him.
Do you also think, and there are questions about this, you're referring to the fact that he's going to be putting out a more unifying message, so perhaps reaching out to more voters there. But in light of what's happened really in the last 48 hours and this assassination attempt, do you see questions being asked of Trump also on his stand on gun laws?
I don't. Honestly, that's not a conversation that has come up very frequently. I think that if he stands strong in favor of the Second Amendment after having experienced what he did, that adds to his credibility as someone who supports the Second Amendment. So I don't see this as putting him on the hot seat on that front.
Also, I just wanted to know from you, Bethany, if you look at the live tracker polls so far, it's always given Trump, yes, an edge. But so far, it's been about 47 versus a 45%. Do you see Trump's numbers, the trajectory, completely different and soaring up now?
I don't. I think that most people have made up their minds about who they're voting for. There are always going to be people on the margins. I think that what this is going to do is discourage probably a lot of Biden voters who would have been really enthusiastic. They probably won't bother to get out the vote. What's sad about the American voters is that a lot of people don't bother. And I think that motivating people is really what's important, but also motivating folks who are on the fence. Maybe they'll go out, maybe they won't go out. And I think that there's a lot of apathy among Democratic voters and their base right now. And they're not going to get energized by an 81-year-old man who can't walk across the Oval Office.
That's an important point. Besides that, but do you see also the response from Biden being something that was fitting enough as far as American voters go? Do they see his response to the assassination attempt as fitting? Or do you think that overall the response from Biden perhaps proved to be a further setback for him?
I think that it was neutral. He wasn't inspiring, and this is Biden's problem. He muddled through and he spoke off the teleprompter the best he could. He had a couple of really glaring verbal gaffes. He called it the battle box instead of the ballot box. But his message is not unifying because he's not totally coherent. And I think that that's something that now finally Americans are really trying to grapple with. But I think it was a neutral what his response was. It wasn't inspiring, but it wasn't terribly divisive either.
My final question to you, Bethany, is about the Republican convention and what really to expect. You did tell us that you're picking up that there's going to be a drastic change in the plan as far as Trump's speech goes. What do you think he'll have to do right here to really ensure that, he kind of builds on the momentum going forward, builds on the image that he's created for himself versus that of Biden?
I think that he needs to play into that unifying voice, and I think that he needs to choose his vice presidential nominee with that in mind. So he needs to choose someone who is unifying and not divisive. I don't know if he's going to do that. My instincts are that he's going to choose J.D. Vance, who is not a terribly unifying vice presidential choice, but he needs to sort of be forward facing and look forward and say, I am a candidate who can carry us through the next 4 years. My opponent cannot. And then give a very clear vision as to what he wants to do in the coming 4 years. If he's able to do that, I think that he's going to win. He's never been leading by this amount in an election before. No Democratic Party candidate has been losing by these margins at this stage of the calendar year in 40 years.
Just a quick follow-up on that, on the Republican convention and the announcement of the vice presidential Republican nominee as well. There's a lot of talk here in India and a lot of interest on whether Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be named. What are the chances of that, Bethany?
I think they're pretty significant. He is an insider within the Trump camp. I don't think he'll be chosen. I think that that he's going to be saved, honestly, for a very high cabinet position. Okay. I think that the short list is J.D. Vance, who's a senator out of Ohio, Doug Burgum, who is from the Midwest. I think it's probably going to be J.D. Vance. That's my instinct.
All right. Bethany, appreciate you taking the time out and joining us here on India Today. Bethany, running us through really what the sentiment is in America and what perhaps the impact this assassination attempt could have on the larger picture, on the U.S. election, on Trump's campaign in particular, as he's now in Milwaukee for the Republican convention. Thanks very much, Bethany, for joining us.